This is a video that I am pumped about. It is a full review, top-down pros and cons review of Minn Kota's latest anchor, the Raptor. On the boat now, I have rolled it in single mode with one Raptor and dual mode with two Raptors. I've tested the foot switches and we'll talk about their reliability on the water because I've got some stuff to say about that. I'll also talk about why I went the Raptor over the Powerpole, and there's a couple of key differences that you should probably know about. If you're new to the product, we'll also talk about why this product specifically gets you more fish, so let's get into it. So when I picked up my boat, the placement of some sort of spike style anchor on the back of the boat was one of the priorities that I had. And the reason for that, I used it before I knew the advantages of it. And particularly for a guy like me that's inshore, lakes, rivers, estuary type fishing, the product really excels in those settings. And if you're not familiar with the product, that's the first thing that we're going to talk about. Who should think about purchasing a spike and what some of the advantages and disadvantages of the spike are. Personally though, as I went through and decided which product to buy, I had some questions. Should I go for the Powerpole blade or should I look at the Minn Kota Raptor, the latest one that's on the market? And there's a couple of key differences between those two products that made me decide to go with the Raptor. So we'll talk about that as point number 2. The third item was single mode or dual mode. So I bought two, but I only ran with one on the boat for a period of time. And then after a couple of months, I loaded the second one on there, and I can talk to you about the differences about having one versus two because there are some key differences. And lastly, I'll talk about the product itself. I'll give you the pros and cons, where the product is sold, and what I think Minn Kota could have done a little bit better for this product. Now, whilst this video isn't a sponsored video, I'm not getting paid for it, and the opinions on it are mine. I do need to give a quick shout out to Manning River Marine, who helped me purchase these Raptors and stick them on the back of my boat. They were awesome in terms of knowledge, particularly with the install and a couple of maintenance tips post the initial purchase. If you're a fan of my content, you got to be a fan of these guys because they support this content, and James and Chris, who run that business, are a family owned business, and I'd highly recommend you consider them. Even if you go with Powerpole or the Minn Kota Raptor, it really doesn't matter. They sold both of those brands, so consider them for your next purchase and support the channel. Now, a spike style anchor has been on the market for a number of years now, and they are taking over the market like wildfire. Most of the pros and the tournament guys are already at least rolling one of them on their back of the boat. For me, it made sense. I'd spend all this time idling into a spot, turning my engine off, putting my electric motor in that's brushless, and then sounding up the fish and trying to find them. When I did eventually find them, the last thing I wanted to do was drop a piece of metal that would clunk over the side. Clunk, 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 clunk. We all know that clunk sound. It reverberates through your hull and just scares bloody every fish off. And nothing is more frustrating, particularly when you can't get a fish to bite your lure. I didn't like the idea of undoing all that work with a giant anchor on the side. So functionally, a Raptor will quietly deploy as you float into a spot. It will calmly drive into the sand, the mud, the silt, whatever the bottom is, and hold your boat in position. When you want to move again, it will calmly pull itself out of the water and allow you to move to the next position and do it quietly. So the noise these units make was the first thing that took me by surprise. The second was the convenience. I can deploy the Raptors in around about 5 to 6 seconds and redeploy them and stow them in an equal amount of time. For me, they made me agile on the water. They felt as though I could just go up to a place and stop wherever I wanted. And importantly, there was no manual labor when pulling up that heavy anchor and chain from the bottom. It's a simple push button with either a foot stomp at the front or by remote control around your neck if that's where you want to put it. But again, no lifting involved. And here's an example of what I mean. My buddy and I had got a few fish at this spot here. We were done and we dropped our rods. I started the engine, got it to tick over. The poles came up and we were off to the next spot. Super convenient. In fishing terms though, do they help you catch more fish? And the answer to that is hell yeah, they do. It's not really hard to imagine why or how. Here the Raptors go down, we fish, we work a flat. And initially there's no fish, so we don't get any for the moment, but the Raptors come up, the wind then blows us down the drift another 50 odd meters, and we both start to get little taps and hits. When we get the first fish and we think it's good, the poles go down and stop us from drifting onto the patch of feeding fish. Because we're in location and we haven't disturbed those feeding fish, we score more fish. If we had have kept drifting down onto that spot or deployed a big, metal anchor over the side, or we'd even used the trolling motor to fight against the wind to hold us in spot, there's every likelihood that we would have disturbed that patch of fish that we were hitting. The other thing to think about in this scenario, if I had have used my trolling motor, the trolling motor would be up into wind and we would have been down the back of the boat fishing off the back. And that concept really grinds my gears because I've spent $10,000+ on electronics rigging out my casting deck so that it is a nice suite. I want to enjoy that stuff. So if I'm at the back and the electronics are on the casting deck that's up the front, I don't like that idea. So by having the poles, I can orientate the boat the way that I am going and fish the way that I'm going whilst looking at all the stuff that I've purchased. I think it's a really powerful concept. The whole idea of being able to see fish or catch fish and stop immediately so that you can catch more of them. Now the poles that I bought are 10 foot in size and they come with an active anchoring that I'll talk about in a minute, but my poles are only good to 10 foot of depth. You can get them down to 8 feet and they do work a treat there, but anything deeper than that, I'm actually happy to be on my trolling motor on spot lock. There's a lot more water in the water column there, so I'm not too concerned, or I'm less concerned, I guess, about making a bit of noise. I actually haven't met anybody yet that has said to me, Byron, I don't love my Raptors and I'd like to sell them, or I'd like to sell them and get rid of them. Everybody that has them wants to keep them, and I guess that was all the proof that I needed to make the purchase. So there's two main reasons that I chose to go Minn Kota Raptor over Powerpole blade, and it was a tough decision. I'd used Powerpole on the kayak for a number of years and I was familiar with that product, but this Raptor came with a couple of features that really set it apart from its other competitors. The first and the main one for me, the big ticket item, was the active anchoring technology that the Raptors actually have. Now Powerpole have that in their kayak space, but for some reason they don't have it in their Powerpole blade. When the Raptors are deployed in the water, the unit will sense when the waves and the wind are dislodging those Raptors and the spikes from the bottom, and if they're beginning to get picked up and dislodged, the Raptor will automatically drive the spike back into the dirt or the mud. The so what to all of that is that I don't want to be fishing a rock ball with a bit of swell like these shots here and catching a fish and processing it, maybe taking some photos, and be dislodged because of the surf. The last thing I want in this scenario is my boat to move, lift off the bottom, and drift and smash up against the rocks. That extra protection that the active anchoring gives me in this scenario, for me personally, was a must. And so far, after a number of months of using it in white caps, in waves, in bad weather, in solid swell, these things have been solid and held me in, and I trust them to hold my boat when I tell them to hold my boat. The second reason I bought them was because of the hydraulic pump and the hydraulics. There is a noticeable difference between the Powerpole product and the Raptor product in terms of size. From my eyes, I reckon they're around about 20% bigger, maybe 25% bigger, just eyeballing it. And that's because I am led to believe that the Minn Kota Raptor has a beefed up and down hydraulic pump. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to find exactly what the pump output pressure was, but I think the hint is in the hydraulic lines. If you have a look at the Powerpole webpage, you can see that actually advertised that they have high rated hydraulic lines that are rated to 1750 PSI. And that is a selling point. They're actually quite highly rated. That's a lot of pressure when you think about it. However, when you go across to the Raptor site, you will see the lines are rated to 3100 PSI, which is 77% more than the other. Now, understand that it's only the line rating, but one can make some assumptions. I'm also led to believe that on the Powerpole product, the down pressure to plant you in is more than the up pressure, and that can lead to the point where you might get your pole stuck in the dirt. Powerpole's solution to that is for you to start your outboard motor and drive away, and the pole will fold up on itself. On the Minn Kota Raptor, they haven't done that. There's no dissimilar pressure that is just high pressure down and high pressure up. If you need to, I guess you could drive away, but I haven't had to need to do that yet. Because of those equal pump pressures up and down, I've been able to get the Raptor out in every scenario. So far, I've jammed these spikes into mud, sludge, sand, everything that I can think of, rocks included, and I haven't got myself stuck once. I've got the spike aspects so deep that they've come up completely covered in mud before, and there's never really been a problem for me to get them out. So with one Raptor on the boat, I got all the benefits that I've been talking about in this video so far, and it was really great to have it. The thing that I learned to do with it though is, and the thing that you need to consider with having one Raptor on there, is how the boat will pivot when it's deployed in the water. You do become subject to the current and the wind as the boat moves around a little because you're anchored down by one single source. And this is an example of it. You've got the wind that's coming from the top of the screen, the Raptors are in, and we're fishing. You can see that we're drifting in a certain direction, and every now and again I'm lowering the spike and raising it as we move along the area that we're fishing. When we start to get bites, the pole goes in, we get more fish, and you can see the spike at the back of the boat deployed in the water. When I installed the second Raptor though, it wasn't a case of 1 + 1 = 2 and my enjoyment went up by a little bit. It actually went up by a lot. From my opinion, it was like 1 + 1 = 4. I found the usage went up significantly because the versatility of the boat went up significantly. I found that I could stop the boat at any angle, at any time, regardless of the wind or current. They do have some small effect, but realistically, I found that I eliminated the environment out of the equation. And I'm gonna show some shots of that here. On this first one, I've got a snag on the rope that's on the other side of the jetty. You can see the boat pull up, the anchors go down, I step off the boat, I deal with the lure, I gret it back, and then I step back onto the boat. It is super convenient. I also found it really handy at the boat ramp for solo launching. I like the idea of offsetting the boat from the jetty so that the boat didn't bang up against the structure of the ramp or some random poles and whatnot. But it was easy, back the boat in, pole down, get out of the boat, take care of the car, and then the boat was always still sitting there. And the other aspect it added was the angle at which I was fishing. I could fish perpendicular to the current and the boat would stay in location like it is now. The advantages of that are awesome because we all know that snags and our fish don't always line up with where the wind or the current is pushing the boat. I almost eliminated that completely and I was able to put my boat in most positions. So in my opinion, is buying two Raptors better than one? Yes, and yes by a long way. But do you need it? And that is the question that you should ask. I think the things that are going to go through my head again, if I was to consider them, were, am I going to fish areas with high flow and high current? Do I fish areas that are windy? But more importantly, lastly, do I want the ability to control my casting deck and plan it at every angle that I want, or any angle that I want, in order to hit those random snags that are sitting ever so slightly off? For me personally, I don't think I will ever go back to having one. There's just personally too many applications that I found two more beneficial than one. So let's be super critical of the Raptors for the moment. In terms of their functioning, deploy, redeploy, the spikes, the active anchoring, I couldn't fault those aspects. Where I did find constructive points were the areas around them, in particular this triangle foot switch. So as soon as I put the unit on the boat, I knew I didn't like it. The edges are raised and the buttons are small when you compare it to the total size of the switch triangle. Because the buttons were so small and they were next to each other, it just took a little bit more concentration when I was fighting that fish to then stop concentrating on that, look down, identify where I needed to foot stomp, and then action it and then come up and fight the fish again. Not only that, but I found the switches and the actual functioning of the buttons connecting to the Raptors intermittent. I didn't have 100% confidence that I was going to tap those buttons and the deployment of the Raptors would occur. And I knew this was a triangle kind of foot stomp remote problem because my remotes were still working. Over time, those button pushes got worse, and I cannot recommend you purchase that. I would eventually return it under warranty and get some credit back in the store so that I can buy these stomp switches that have just hit Australia. You'll notice the difference with these ones in that the switch doesn't have a lot of body, it is all button. And that is the type of button that I can just blindly foot stomp and know that I've pretty much got that thing. So when you're making your purchase, consider those circle ones and put those on the boat and try and avoid that triangle one that I had nothing but dramas with. The next point relates to the install and is less about the product but how I install it. I recommend that you do not go directly to the battery. There is a 0.3, 0.4 amp draw on them, so if your boat does stay in the shed for around about 2 to 3 weeks and you don't take it out, you will probably flatten your battery somewhat, depending on the size of your battery, I know. So consider having it behind an isolate switch so you can turn it off. On the cosmetic side of the house, you've got those Minn Kota stickers that are sitting at the top of the Raptor units. I recommend you be gentle and hand wash around those stickers. I smashed them with a gurney and was removing letters left, right and center. I then quickly ran around the boat, picked up the stickers and stuck them back on, so they're there at the moment, but try and keep the high pressure away from those. And while we're on cleaning, even though these things are designed for salt water, I definitely recommend preventative maintenance, and that is washing them down with fresh water. You'll see the hydraulic arms on both the units that are, Powerpole and Raptor do have brass fittings on them, and in salt water they will oxidize and discolor. On these units you can prevent a lot of that by just washing down your unit with fresh water, so definitely do that post your fishing trip. I'm gonna wrap this up, but I completely punished my Raptors while I had them. Look at the scarring. I'm going to show you some photos here, but they went into rock, they went into racks. I absolutely smashed their usage. I can say though that they held up, and I was really impressed with how these units held up. Truly, when I say I don't want to have a boat without 2 of these on them ever again, I really mean it. The versatility that I got, the fact that I don't have any manual labor for deploying or redeploying an anchor, the idea that with the push of the button I can just be out and up and gone and then arrive at another location, catch a fish, button down, more fish of the same school without ever drifting over the top of them. That was powerful. Ultimately, if you're the type of guy like me that likes to catch fish over and over, these are worth a serious consideration. Stay safe. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you next time.